Hi everyone, and welcome to this series of Build the Story, Then the Dashboard Healthcare Edition. So very quickly, we previously built a retail example as well as a manufacturing one, so make sure to check those out too. But in this video, we're going to be focusing on a Power BI dashboard that's all about hospital bed management, patient admissions and discharges as well. And the core end users for this are the bed managers as well as the ward supervisors, who overall have a core responsibility in ensuring that there is a smooth flow across the different wards within the hospital, right? So the key things that they manage and need to oversee are things like the admissions, the discharges, the overall bed availability, any readmissions which have a direct impact or a good indicator on the quality of care patients are receiving. So some of the core challenges that the bed managers and the ward supervisors have are things like, well, if the bed capacity goes over 90%, that's not really good. Or if we have patients who are ready to be discharged, but there are various different blockers that prevent us from discharging them, well, that is also not good because we're not freeing up any space for any new patients coming in as well. So we're going to start off by going through this solution first, so diving into Power BI, see how we brought it to life, but make sure you stay till the end because that's when we go through the data storytelling approach. How did we gather the requirements in order to build this solution in the first place? Okay, so when we land in the solution, the first thing the end users, so the bed managers and the ward supervisors, will see is this homepage. Now, I've kept it clean and simple. Of course, it's on brand. You can see the hospital name here at the top, Green Valley. You can see the name or the title of the solution, Hospital Bed Management and Discharge Dashboard. Apart from that, the end users can come to the capacity button in order to be directed to the capacity overview page, or they can go ahead and select the ward level analysis. Now, look, this is just an example. I've kept it nice and simple. When working with clients, I do add some additional helpful information in here that assists the users in getting more familiar with the solution. But anyway, for now, let's get into it. So I'm going to go ahead and select the capacity button here. And as you would expect, as soon as you select capacity, it takes you into the capacity page. So just a quick overview so we can get familiar with what we're seeing. I guess here on the left-hand side, you can see I have Green Valley, again, the logo right at the top, and then this is our left navigation panel. So if you hover over home, notice that it's all dynamic to show to the end users that these are active. Right now, capacity is selected. And of course, I can go ahead and select the filter button as well as the help button. And we're going to see these as we go through the solution. Right at the top, the title, a nice little description. Always nice to have a description of the page, I find. Now, one thing really important to call out. In the top right here, you'll notice that, well, the last refresh was the 26th of May at 11 a.m., right? Of course, this is just dummy data. But in the live scenario, this updates hourly, and it does come from a real use case, by the way, right? So it really gives bed managers and ward supervisors that near real-time visibility that they need, okay? Now, moving on from that, what do we have? Well, I guess the first metric that we want to explore is the bed occupancy percentage, right? So you can see right now the bed occupancy percentage is at 86.8%. And the idea is when it starts creeping up or above 90%, well, that really does signal to the hospital and all the staff that, well, we're under real pressure right now and some decisions need to be made. Now, alongside that, you'll also see that I have the used and the total, right? So it's great to see the bed occupancy, but the bed managers, when we were collecting the requirements, they felt really strongly about this. It's great, but we also want to see the actual. So how many beds do we have in the hospital? And also how many of those beds are being used as well, right? So the other thing they called out, though, was we must see the breakdown instantly. They said, look, lads, it's great 86.8%, they used the total, but alongside that, we want to see the wards instantly, and that's what we have down here. So we have the 4 wards, or the 4 wards specific to this solution. So we have the emergency department, the acute medical unit, surgical, and general medicine as well. Now, we've added these little progress bars below. Now, I think they're pretty handy. At a glance, I can instantly see the progress bars that are not completely filled in. Well, there's still some capacity to bring in more patients or admit more patients, right? And right below it, so for example, emergency department ED, notice the green bar is more or less full. 39 beds out of 40, right? But if I go to general med, I can see there's a little bit more wiggle room there. So 59 beds are being used, but we have a total of 70 within this ward. Now, the next thing we have is bed availability after discharge. So here's the thing, right? They said it's great to be able to see the breakdown by wards, but alongside that, if we have high capacity against one of these wards, right? A common reason could be, well, we have many patients who are ready to be discharged. So we want to have visibility over that. And that's what you get right here. 20 patients are ready for discharge, right? And then we also broke it down by the ward itself. For example, I can see that emergency department, well, is at high capacity, right? So if I go to ED, notice I have 5 people who are ready to be discharged. In fact, if I actually discharge these 5 people, look at the extra insight added here, which is really valuable. Bed occupancy drops to 85%. And that's within the range that we want to be in, right? So it really pushes the bed managers, the ward supervisors to understand, okay, well, we're at high capacity. We do have patients ready to be discharged. Which ward are they in? If we do discharge them, what will the bed occupancy percent go to? And now, as you can imagine though, why do we have so many people ready to be discharged? And that's when the blockers come in. There's always some sort of blocker that is preventing the patients from being discharged. And here on the right-hand side, that's exactly what we have, right? So you can see once again, it's broken down by the ward. So if I see general medicine, see what I have here, the 8 at the top, well, 4 of them are being blocked by medication. The other 2 are being blocked by paperwork, and the other 2 are being blocked by some sort of transport issue, right? Maybe we can't transport them to another hospital, back to the homes, to a care home, etc., etc. And when going through this with the user, I guess what was really interesting was it's not just these aren't clinical blockers, right? They're more logistical sometimes. So it really shifts the focus for the bed managers and the ward managers to, okay, how many patients do we have ready to be discharged, right? Versus why are they not able to be discharged, right? In other words, where should we put our focus on as well? So it's really interesting. Okay. Moving on from that, we then come to the 7-day average bed occupancy percentage, right? So this is something the bed managers were really keen on. They told us it's one of those things to look at. It's one of those things that if we look at today, for example, 86.8%, that's great, right? But to actually manage more the long-term capacity pressures, I guess they need to see how things are trending over the last 7 days. And that's exactly what we have here as well. So this gives them the wider lens. Think of it like that. Instead of just reacting to a spike today, they can spot patterns and ask, how have we been running for the last 7 days? Has it been a really hot week? Are we staying consistently between that ideal 85 to 90% bed occupancy rate that we're trying to stay within? So let me show you what I mean by that. So just to change these numbers around a little bit, I am going to go ahead and select general medicine for a moment. So I just cross-filtered. I selected the slice of the donut chart here, general med. Now let's see what happens. Today's bed occupancy is sitting at 84.3%, which is, well, technically underused, right? But then if I go down here to the 7-day average, it's 87.6%, which is spot on. And, well, it's marked as good because it's within that bracket that we want. So really that tells the general medicine department, that it might be quieter today, but overall they've been managing the beds really well throughout the last 7 days. So no real need to panic here. Okay. Now let's flip it around a little bit. I'm going to deselect that. I am going to go to the filter panel. And by the way, this is just to bring up a sample, right? So, oh, it's the first time I'm showing the filter panel. So notice as soon as I selected the filter panel, everything grays out, right? How nice is that? And you get this new panel expand, and you have all your filters in here available to be selected, right? And you can add more. But for now, like I said, I want to select Bay 8 Baby just to bring up a specific example. Here we are. Okay. So now what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing today's bed occupancy is at 90%, which is labeled as good, is right on the upper edge. Yep. However, the 7-day figure bed occupancy is at 90.5%, which tips us into that risk zone, overcapacity essentially, right? And this means that while today we might be looking okay, the trend over the past week shows we've been running at or just over capacity. And maybe that's something that needs to be flagged, or maybe something we need to act on. As you can see here, we're always, majority of times, we are above for the last 7 days for these 2 bays, okay? And that's why having both these, the current and the rolling view, is really powerful. But for now, I am going to go back to filter. I am going to remove the filters for there, just so we can go back to our default view as well. Okay, where do we move to next? Let's have a look. Well, another thing that was highly requested was this little panel down here. So what do we see? We see the total admissions today, the discharges so far today, and 3 of which are readmissions. So we're now starting to introduce the concept of readmissions, which is really important, right? So we have a high number of patients who are being readmitted, coming back to the wards and the hospitals. Well, that clearly signals maybe some sort of discharge quality. Maybe we discharged them too quick. Maybe we didn't provide the post-care that was needed, and that certainly needs to be measured as well. Apart from that, we do have a little bit of a narrative here, which is helpful. So 6 net admissions versus discharges, right? And 27% of admissions are readmissions as well. And there is some conditional formatting there based on a rule that we come up with. Next up, we have a rolling 7-day bar chart to help spot trends over time, right? And the idea here is pretty simple. So if the admissions keep outpacing the discharges, well, your wards are going to fill up, right? But if discharges are steady or rising, you're making some room as well. So really, this is perfect for the supervisors want to monitor daily volume shifts and sort of stay ahead of any potential bottlenecks before they actually escalate further as well. Now, the other thing, I guess, also is if we have a look at this in a bit more detail, you'll notice from the 23rd, 24th, 25th, right, admissions have been consistently higher than discharges. And if you look at the difference down here, you will see we had 2 new additions, 3, then 6. And by the way, today is the 26th, if you remember, and we've already by 11 a.m. had 6 admissions, right? Or this is the admissions minus the discharges, right? So in total, we had 11 admissions, as you can see from the green bar here. We discharged 5, so we added 5 additional patients to the hospital. And this view makes it easy to act early on, right? Especially when you combine it with the ready for discharge section, you know exactly what's coming in and what you could be doing to possibly discharge additional people as well. Simple but powerful. We then also have the planned admissions versus unplanned admissions, right? So this one was one that was really called out and made total sense when we was gathering the requirements. I can't remember if it was the bed managers or the ward supervisors, but they told us we need to track the ratio of planned versus unplanned admissions, right? So the way we visualize it here, pretty nice and easy. It has a total count. So we had 8 planned admissions and 3 of those were unplanned. And this should add up to the admissions that we have here essentially as well. So in summary, the more planned, better control over the capacity because we know they're coming in, right? However, if we have any spikes in unplanned admissions, well, it's not great. There'll be more that firefighting situation. It's less predictable, right? So it's a nice and quick way to understand from today's people coming in, which ones were planned versus unplanned. And then if I go on the far right down here, length of stay all, this is the final visual. And initially we did have this on a separate page, but I guess it was called out that they want to see as part of this view. After a few discussions, it made sense, I guess, why they wanted to see it at a glance in combination with all these other visuals as well. But why do we want to see this, I guess, is the big question. Because longer stay, the longer you stay, simply ties up a bed, right? It's that simple. So we're going to get an understanding of how many people are staying in different bucket days or ranges, let's say. So you can see that 81 people are less than 7 days, 7 to 14 is 60, 14 to 30 days we have 34 people, or people who have stayed 30 days plus, we have 8 patients essentially. So for a bed manager, it really does help. It helps them prioritize where discharge planning efforts should go. Okay, so hopefully you can see how powerful the capacity overview page is for the bed managers and the ward supervisors. We'll see afterwards the requirements that they provided us, which helped us build this. I already showed you the filter panel here on the left-hand side. I am going to click the help button. So I have a separate YouTube video on how we create these type of experiences. They're not a gimmick. You might think it's a gimmick. I understand why you might think that as soon as you see it. But think of a modern web application, or even when you go on some of your favorite websites, they have these on-screen experiences, and that's what exactly we have here. So welcome to the Capacity and Flow dashboard. It gives you a bit of a description of the report we just went through now, a bit of a screenshot, a preview of the entire report. You can go previous. It takes you back, which is the start, so it exits you out. You can get started as well. And notice what happens. That grayed out background now is still there, but you can see the visual, which this prompt is now giving us some helpful tips about, or giving us an explanation. So real-time bed occupancy percentage tracks how full each ward is right now. If it's over 90%, you're at risk of bottlenecks. How good is that all? When your end users land in this solution, it's not just about building something and giving it to them. Even if you've built it with them, which is a big, big plus, you want to think about the adoption afterwards. How do we help users get familiar? What about the users that have never used Power BI before? What about the users who haven't been part of this process? This is why we build these experiences, right? So I can click next, and you'll notice we now go through the entire dashboard, right? It's taking you through the entire dashboard, through every visual, giving helpful information. You can go next, or you can go previous as well. Anytime you want to stop, just click the little X. You exit the guided learning experience, as I like to call it. Okay, so with that said, we have seen the capacity overview page. Now let's move to the ward level analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And here we go. So welcome to the ward level analysis. Now, why did we build this page? Well, the capacity overview page gave us a bit more of a full picture across all wards. This one is to really focus into an individual ward, right? And I guess right away you can see at the top, ward level ED, right? So the emergency department. That's been selected in a filter, right? As you can see here, ward ED. And just like before, refresh timestamp here in the top right, everyone. So we can see when it was last refreshed. It's 26th of May. The numbers are working as they are working in the other page, as they should. Now, I'm not going to go through this in full detail, but we do have this top level KPIs here. So we have the bed occupancy for the entire ward, we have admissions, we have discharges, and we also have the readmissions as well. So again, it just gives us an instant read or understanding on the current flow. Are we filling up too fast? Are discharges behind? And are we seeing patients bounce back in as well? Now, this is where we introduce the breakdown, I guess, from a bay perspective for the first time. So emergency department has the following bays: medical triage, rapid assessment, resus, and minors as well. Okay. So, and then you can, as soon as you see this breakdown, you can also see the total beds and the used beds. So instantly I can tell, look, we're at full capacity here, right? It's not great. You can also see it here, 97.5%, 39 out of 40. It's all it's all bays, right? However, right below it, notice we have ready for discharge, right? And that's crucial. It not only shows us where we've got maybe some movement potential, but again, it also shows us against which bay should we focus on. For example, medical triage have 3 people ready to be discharged. Why don't we put effort to try and push these people, right? On the far right here, I have assigned staff and discharge readiness. So let's just have a quick look of what we're seeing here. So if I scroll down, you can see that, well, I have all the staff members that are currently working, right? So if I go up and I go to Andrew Harris, patients assigned 1. 1 patients are ready for discharge, base covered, medical triage. I can see for Claire Smith, well, patients assigned, she's got 5 patients assigned to her, 0 of her patients are ready for discharge, and she's covering the medical triage and the other one as well. Okay, so you can see how helpful already this is, because it helps supervisors and anyone else viewing this dashboard to quickly spot maybe workload imbalances. Maybe one person is overloaded. You can identify if anyone is holding up discharges as well, even if it's unintentionally, right? And you can check whether staff are spread across too many bays, which might impact coordination and their ability as well. So in the real world scenario, this kind of visibility can improve handovers, reduce delays, and ensure no one is stretched too thin, which is really important, okay? Now, the other thing I want to call out, of course, is patient admissions and discharge status. So what do we see here? Well, we go down to the patient level now for the first time. I can see the patient name. I can see the first name, last name, the bay that they are assigned to, the admission date, and whether they are ready to be discharged. So it's a live list, always tied to the latest refresh. So you can sort, scan, and act immediately, essentially. And some teams can even filter down further to isolate long stay patients or plan bay rotations as well. So it's really, really useful. Okay, so hopefully you saw the value from the ward level analysis as well. I am going to go back to the home page, but like we said, this dashboard was not built first, right? Before we got to this dashboard, we sat down with the bed managers as well as the ward supervisors, asked a set of tailored questions to be able to understand exactly what is needed. What's the solution they need to help them get closer to their objective or overcome the challenges that they're experiencing? So let's go ahead and check this out now. As you can see on screen now, we have a bit of a storyboard. This is the part most people neglect. Before we jump into the development and the design and choosing the right visuals and all the other exciting stuff down in the data side, this is where we should be spending more time. Okay, how do we do it? Well, we ask a set of tailored questions to the right people, the right audience, and I'll come back to that, in order to help them derive what is genuinely needed from the solution, right? And here's the fun part. Sometimes you might find that no solution is needed. A dashboard might not be needed. You don't need to spend the time, the money, and the effort in building something, right? So we start off with the audience, as I said, and this is one thing I really push, right? And the number one reason I always say reporting projects fail is simply because we aren't speaking to the right people. It's crazy. And the reality is this. We go into an organization, maybe we have someone who's a bit senior, high authority, claims to be able to represent all the actual end users who will be using the solution. Reality is they can't. And I've heard all the excuses before, but some of them are valid, don't get me wrong, but the idea is we want to push them to one side and say, well, can we actually still speak to the people who will actually be using this solution? Not only because they're going to be using it, they're going to be the right people to tell us about their pain points, their ambitions, where they're trying to go, why they're trying to go there, what actions do they regularly take, etc. But it also builds trust. We need to build that layer of trust, that foundation early on, because you might actually go ahead and build one of a great solution. And when you go live and the end users see it for the first time, they'll be like, hold up, how comes we weren't involved here? And that will automatically make them push the solution to one side. So as we see on the screen, who was the audience? Well, we sat down primarily with the bed managers. After some discussions, we did include some ward supervisors, and that usually goes against some of the rules that I like to set. However, the bed managers and the ward supervisors, we had a bit of a catch up, let's say, with them in advance before starting data storytelling workshops and requirement gathering, and it was very clear they both had the same goal objective for the solution we were to build. So we wouldn't have any sort of conflicts within the workshops. For that reason, I was happy to bring these two audiences together. They had a common purpose. They were aligning where they wanted to go with the solution we're about to build as well. Okay, so that's who this solution was built for. We identified them. We set up the right workshops in order to ask the right tailored questions. And that's when we start filling in this in. Of course, look, this is an oversimplified example. I don't have all the time to be able to go through the full details, right? But this just brings it to life. Okay, we then move to why build this solution. In other words, what's the purpose of it, right? Where are you trying to go? Is it a place worth going? And we go through this together. So, in other words, what they really called out is, look, we need a near real-time solution to be able to monitor and understand the overall pressure, the patients being admitted, and to be able to discharge patients who are ready to go in a timely manner. We also need to be able to manage the overall bed occupancy, do it effectively as well, but ensure a smoother flow or a patient flow and timely admissions and discharges. So that's essentially the overall purpose. And to me, that was a very strong one as well. Now, once we nailed that down, I guess the next part was, okay, what's the objective, right? And it might seem like the same thing, and you're right, it is, right? But I count the first as the long narrative. I really want to nail it down. What makes this measurable then? How do we know we're moving towards this place? Can you just give me a single sentence almost of what is the objective here, right? And I guess when we were searching for that single measurable objective, and by the way, when you go through this such approach and you gather requirements by asking more tailored questions, taking more time with the end users, there is going to be some back and forth. You are going to get those awkward looks, right? But it's worth it in the end, I promise, right? But fundamentally, we got down to this. Look, we need to make sure that the bed occupancy, both on the day and the 7-day average, is between 85 to 90%. That's fundamentally it. Great. So now that we understand the objective, right, and we've narrowed it down to make it somewhat measurable, so we know we should be staying between here. The next part is, well, how will you track it? So this is where we like to think of it the KPIs, or measure sometimes in this instance to understand if we're doing well or bad. And this is what we come up with, right? So as you can see, we have the current bed occupancy percentage, the 7-day average bed occupancy, patients ready for discharge, net admissions versus discharges, average length of stay. Now, hopefully you can see how this now all starts to relate back to the solution we built. We do not move to the build unless we nail down the requirements, unless we understand exactly if we are building something that will provide value to the end users as well. Okay? Now let's move on to what's called in red or green. Okay? So what do I mean by that? What is the level of detail, in other words, right? So where are you trying to, and also, by the way, it's worth calling out, you can see the story building up now, can't you? Because why build a solution? The objective, where are you trying to go? What's your overall drive for this, right? Okay, well, we know where you're trying to go now. You're trying to maintain bed occupancy between 85 to 90%. We really understand why that's important to you. How do we know we're moving towards this? Are we on track? What are the KPIs we need to see? Well, bed occupancy, the 7-day average as well, patients ready for discharge, net admissions versus discharges, etc., etc. And now we want to understand, well, okay, well, let's say one of these KPIs is maybe not in the best position, right? Well, what are the elements that could be making it be in the red or negative, or even in the green and positive as well. And that's what we are on here, what's causing red or green, okay? So you can see, for example, specific wards over capacity, right? So maybe certain wards may be consistently working at a high capacity, and as we saw in the dashboard, it creates those hotspots. Even if total capacity looks stable, a single ward might be really high all the time. The other one is patients are being blocked, staff discharge readiness, high readmissions, right? We have many people being readmitted into the hospital. Then we need to understand that, because that could be a fundamental cause of why one of the KPIs is not looking good as well. That way, there's a completely different set of actions I will take for high readmissions, let's say, versus maybe patients being blocked as well, okay? And you can see all the other ones there as well: high unplanned admissions, specific bays over capacity. Okay, now that we have that, we then come to the decisions or actions, essentially, right? So I usually like to say, if we can't take any action here, is there really a point of building it? Is it worth the time and money we're about to invest? And look, I do get it. Some dashboards are informational dashboards, but the point of this is there any action we will be deriving once we build this solution? And we should be having those discussions. We should be promoting solutions that are genuinely actionable as well, right? So you can see, for example, prioritize discharge blockers, reassign staff where needed, delay non-urgent admissions if capacity is high. These are all genuine actions that bed managers and ward supervisors tell us they can take on the back of having all this information made available to them as well. So hopefully now you get a good understanding, or you had a good view into how we gather requirements. This is how we gather the story before we build the solution. We spend more time here, and we ensure that we only build solutions that offer some genuine value back to the end users. So if you need any help going through the process of deriving requirements, building an actionable solution, do feel free to reach out. Plenty of more resources on the website as well.